This is a ZenoLink data view analysis for Taylor McNougal. This is for a hockey skate acceleration from a dead stop collected in December of 2011. We will skip right to the center of mass acceleration. So here is where we will track the speed of the center of mass as it accelerates forward. To do this, the first thing you have to understand is that we're going to look at three essential gait cycles. The first one is what we'll call the initial push-off. So as they're starting from a dead stop, it's going to be the initial push-off that we look at, and we're going to quantify it or look at the events of what we'll call heel strike, mid stance, and toe off. Those are the standard gait cycle events. And then what we're going to look at after the initial push-off, so you'll have the initial push taking place here off the left leg. Then we'll have a gait cycle on the right side. So we're looking at what we call heel strike, mid stance, toe off. Again, just your standard traditional gait events for the right side and then back to the left side. What we typically see on the initial push off is a pretty good acceleration forward. We then see a lull through mid stance and then a quick burst of speed through toe off, from mid stance to toe off, and then again a lull through mid stance and a quick burst of speed from a mid stance to toe off again. Average acceleration in the first three steps should get you somewhere between 5 to 6 meters per second. So roughly, if you average at 5.5 meters per second is about average, and that's we're about just a little off that, about 5 meters per second. Good speed is going to be above 6 meters per second, somewhere between 6 to 6.5 meters per second. Fantastic speed is going to be just above 6.5 meters per second. So in this case, what we have is in the first three steps, the initial push-off and two gait cycles, a max speed of about 5 meters per second, and that takes place in just about a full second, just under a full second. So this is decent acceleration, but on the low end of average. And we would look to see Taylor increase to get up into that 5.5 to 6, but really looking for him to be above 6, somewhere between 6 to 6.5 meters per second, and to shorten this time frame to a little bit more, a little bit less than a second. Usually it's about well, it's, a few fractions less than a second, but that's a huge. That would be a huge improvement. The other thing we see here when we look at the acceleration is we like to see that lull acceleration. You get more essentially trending speed and more acceleration overall when that occurs. This pattern is there, but it's not real effective. That tells us that there's probably some biomechanical breakdown occurring in the acceleration pattern. The next thing we're going to look at is torso rotation. Now, this is extremely important. What we're looking at is the counter movement. So as the lower body works this way, the upper body works in the opposite direction, creates a muscular pre-stretch on the core musculature, which is then used to accelerate the push leg from toe off into swing phase. And that's a swing through to then heel strike. And so that's really important. What we would expect to see is movement from the upper torso, equal and opposite movement with a little less range of motion, typically by at least 5 or so degrees of the pelvis, and we would like to see those equal and opposite kind of sinusoidal movements, which would indicate good counter stretch, good counter stretch, good counter stretch. What we see from Taylor is some counter stretch on the push-off, but then the upper torso and the pelvis kind of almost track together. So he's getting very little dynamic muscular preload, which is really limiting the swing through. Swing through is a big factor in speed production, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. We look at the next area we look at here is knee flexion extension speed. This is crucial to overall acceleration, because what we're looking for here is you're going to see a pattern of, as the foot comes into contact with the ground, the knee is extending. Then you're going to see the knee go into some flexion through mid stance. Just after mid stance, you should see a burst of extension speed at the knee, And then just prior to foot off the ice, you should see a rapid flexion. So you get both the push against the ice as well as a rapid pull to accelerate forward. So, like we said, we pushed off with the left side. If we go all the way back here, what we see here is a good burst of extension speed, but very limited swing through, very limited flexion speed. So we have decent extension speed, although it could definitely be higher. I'd like to see the extension speed and push off anywhere between 350 to 400 is good. Like to see 400 or above on the swing phases. Here we see on the right side, we see extension speed of about 330 or so. So not the greatest extension speed, but definitely starting to go into flexion more appropriately. So we're getting some of the pull. And then when we see left side again, we see only a speed of about 264 with some limited, pull forward. So we've got two issues. We've got limited pull or limited flexion just prior to toe off, and we also have limited knee extension. So we're limiting both in terms of pattern and as well as output, both on the push extension part as well as the pull, the flexion part, and that's at the knee. We'll take a look now at hip. Again, hip, we're looking for roughly the same pattern. About 300, again, on the push-off, the push-off extension speed's a little bit lower than the other two gait cycles. But again, we're looking for that extension speed at the hip to be at least 350. We see it coming in about 312. So the extension speed is on the low end, and flexion speed, again, is off. When we look at the right side, we see speeds now up in the 400s, which is much better. But again, fairly limited flexion. And here then on the left side, we have an extension speed of about 360, again, limited with limited flexion. So we've got the same problem at the hip as we did at the knee, and that is output both at extension or push as well as flexion or pull. And then we've got a little bit of a patterning problem in that we're not getting good flexion prior to toe off. We'll just take a real quick look before we summarize at range of motion of the extremities. We see that the left knee is going through more total range of motion from extension to flexion. The right knee has a little bit more extension, but dramatically less flexion. So we've got some potential issues on the right side at the knee. And at the hip, we see pretty much symmetric range of motion. So we may have some anatomical or structural issue on the right side around the knee. That would include hamstring, even a little bit of the external rotators on that side, calf and ankle mobility. So what we're looking at here is overall pretty good mechanics, but low average, not below average, but low average speed in the first three steps. We see that we have a lack of dynamic core interaction, muscular preload, and counter torquing. We have limited extension speed output or push speed output at both the knee and the hip, and then we have limited flexion speed at both the knee and the hip, which is our pull speed, and we like to see both the push and the pull actively engaged, and then we also see some patterning issues, mostly with respect to pull. So we'll want to train patterns in core stability and rotation, dynamic stretch shorten, and core counter torquing, definitely. And we're also going to want to look at creating better extension speeds, and then also better patterning to move from rapid extension into rapid flexion more effectively. And then at the same time, we should take a look at the right side around the knee area in terms of range of motion, but also a little bit around the hip in terms of internal external rotation, and then down into the ankle and the foot on that side as well.